It's really amazing to be here, and especially to follow those speakers. Yeah, I've completely distracted from my own talk now because I'm so pleased to have heard the amazing work that's going on. So it's going to be me just speaking with Andre's help because it's such a short talk. I thought it was going to be quicker if just one of us stayed on it, but Georges is here with me to answer questions if necessary. So before we begin, I want to be very clear just about one thing, which is that I myself have spent time within the mental health system as a user. I've spent time in a unit and I'm currently in recovery. So I'm very much a kind of embedded subject, as it were, in what we're discussing. Can I have the first slide, please, Andre?
Andre.
Thank you. So a quick introduction to ZU and our work. Just to be brief, we make playable arts as an anti-capitalist practice. And a few years ago, we rewrote our mission and we decided on the mission, and it should be to eliminate loneliness across the world by 2050. So it's partly kind of tongue-in-cheek, but also knowingly impossible. However, clearly articulated, I think, something that we felt at the time, which was that the world was being more and more atomized and that people were feeling increasingly more isolated. Slide 2, please. No, that's slide 3. Doesn't matter, I'll go for this one. I'll try and catch up with the slides. So this is another show that we did, a performance that we did, which is a VR experience. It's around the theme of the loneliness of death. It's called Good Night, Sleep Tight. It's set in a bed, which is both a kid's bed and then becomes a death bed, where audiences are tucked in by a mother figure that is not these women, but that you see on the VR itself. And it's very much sort of partly existential and partly related to the actual physical act of being put to bed when you were a kid and our relationship to, or our lack of relationship to death. Next slide, please. This is Hotel Medea. We created an overnight show which dealt with being together as a group, as a temporary community throughout the night being, you know, in kind of mythical terms, and also generally consensus would agree that the night times are very, very lonely times. And we ended the show with a huge communal breakfast that you can see here, where the cast and the crew and the audiences all kind of became one group that had survived the night together. And it was something about this temporary communities that can pass through things together, a bit like what we're seeing now with COVID. That was the strength of the piece. Next slide, please. So this is Binaural Dinner Date. Here we created a real dating agency predicated on the need for human beings to have companionship, to be in relationships, and strangers would meet, real strangers, and they would have a mediated date with an actor or waiter, and real life relationships did actually come out of this work. So that's a really quick blast of 3 of our kinds of projects that we do. I hope that that shows that our work is really tasked with bringing people together and forging these temporary communities, but also really pushing the boundaries on intimacy and in particular touch, which is my own particular research area. And from those projects that I've been doing for now about 20 years, there have been long-lasting friendships, and people's lives have been touched in ways that wouldn't have been able to under any other situation, I think, as a way of knowing that we're not alone. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we very much work with ideas around loneliness, and the thing that I'm very interested in at the moment is how loneliness has been sort of co-opted by big business as another way to just make people feel shit about themselves. Like, we're trying to make work really that links the idea that capitalism is in favor of loneliness, you know, as a kind of necessary counterattack. against people being in a community or having a community, because it has all the inherent potential for mobilizing, and that mobilization might create a revolution, you know. And so in a way, for me, what I'm dealing with is this idea that big business has a way to deal with loneliness, which is to kind of market it in a way as if it's something that A, in your head, and B, therefore something that can be cured. You know, and I really say that in good stead against the things that we've just heard about. I think that's like a kind of perfect opposite, you know, point of view from an ethics point of view, given that loneliness is at best something that is a very corrosive force in someone's life, can be anyway, and at worst is you know, a killer epidemic. So in 2017, things really came for a head to us in terms of the things that we were seeing, the people that we were losing, and we wanted to take the subject on a lot more fully. And because we work in gamification, that's where what we do, we wanted to see if we could create something that was around the gamification of something that is probably like the end game of loneliness, which is suicide and parasuicide. So yeah, sorry, can I have the next slide? I think I might have missed it. Oh yeah, there we go. So here we decided to look at more closely the social and economic factors, and we were very much influenced by somebody called Dr. Mark Fisher. Don't know if you guys know about him. He's written extensively about the over-pathologizing of depression, and he suffered from depression, and in fact, sadly, we did lose him. He also took his life. But what he was talking about was that his depression, or that the depression of many people, isn't solely an individual affliction, or the result of a, you know, miswired brain, or a, you know, missing chemical imbalance or two, but that he was seeing more clearly that depression was a social affliction, and that the social had given us a lot to be depressed about across the last 4 decades. And so even though we're keen to reroute the thinking as not just something where loneliness indicates that my brain is sick, whilst not doing away entirely with the absolute medical backdrop that some people's conditions and lives do have, I include myself and my mother in that, I still wanted to reframe its relationship to loneliness, and a loneliness as an affliction of late stage capitalism. Can I have the next slide, please?
You've got about 2 minutes. That'd be
great. Oh, I'm so on it, no problem. So around the same time, we were developing our work with the use of telecommunication technology. And so this was because we wanted to think about scale. So it's really interesting, isn't it, hearing everybody talk about like what's going on in their towns and their areas and that particular. And what I wanted to do very much was about reaching nationwide, because all of our work had been so kind of community focused, and we tend to go to pockets of places where there are people who wanted to do something really wide-reaching. So mainly so that it wasn't just a very niche, a very privileged, kind of sophisticated theatre-going audiences that would be witness to and be privy to our work, but everyone. And that's when we came up with the idea to do this project, which is called Pick Me Up and Hold Me Tight, and it's using all the phone boxes in the UK. The project briefly is about ringing all the phone boxes in the UK at the same time, which is the 1st of January at 11 o'clock in the morning, which is one of the peaks of suicide rates in the UK. And I wanted to think about the phone box as well as an essentially very lonely creature, especially in this picture you can see that its loneliness is accentuated. And also the fact that it was becoming more and more obsolete, right? And I found this like very, very interesting, because there was this kind of possible correlation that was to do with obsoleteness, with the phones, etc., and about people feeling obsolete. So we started this journey of making a game for all the phone boxes. But I don't think we could have fully appreciated what quite what a dumb idea that was until we were really too far into it. So we had to come out the other side. I'll quickly run you through the kinds of problems. Well, we couldn't have the phone ring where absolutely any person could walk past it and pick it up, and then we start talking about suicide, risking triggering people that had no way to consent to the material, etc., etc. So that was a no-no. It was very much about what, you know, instead of staring directly into the sun, what other ways around it could we find? It's very, very difficult to find the right tone. Don't want to come across as crass. It's something that is kind of delicate, but at the same time, you don't want to skirt around the issues, and you don't want to be sort of like continuing the sort of tabooness around it. Things like signposting, you know, to the Samaritans after the interactive thing felt a bit clunky and a bit like, if you've been affected by the issues in this artwork, and it was a bit counterintuitive, because you create something and then kind of try to shoehorn in this this disclaimer. The other thing that was really difficult to make in an artwork is that you can't even begin to do justice to the amount of scholarship out there that exists, that is trying to make sense of this incredible network of ideas that underpins loneliness, right? As people have already described before me, just lots and lots of interconnected ideas and relationing. So finally, we came to the point where we registered something kept coming up again and again across all the fields, all the orbits that we were entering when talking about loneliness, and that was listening. We heard over and over again that the problem for people was not that they couldn't talk, but that they wouldn't be heard. And so we created an interactive experience. In the end, it wasn't a game, that would invite people to take an audit of their listening skills. And it was just a moment, you know, just a moment where people could just edit out the noise of the world and only focus on the potential that they had to be a better listener. And I'll end by saying that the last line reads like this. Thank you for being with me today. Thank you, because the more we look at it, the more we can see that being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable. So we love what we came up with. Still, the piece is still in pilot form. Can I have the next slide, please? And it's ready to be rolled out next January. And if you want to do the experience, you can by, I don't know, sending us your email, and we can hook you up to a pilot version that will ring you on your phone if you want to have a go at the experience itself. Hope that was interesting. I hope that kind of connected to some of your ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting, and it's also a brilliant idea to have no more loneliness by 2025. Yeah, I'm with you.
Easy.